Well, Richard Hendrix was at Coleman last night. Wasn't particularly crazy. Alabama scored 100 again. That's become commonplace. Richard with the SEC Network and ESPN. What is up, Richard? How are you today, my friend?
Doing great, guys. Thank y'all for having me.
Yeah, we always appreciate you coming on. It was interesting. Nate Oates said Monday he had to extend practice because he was not pleased. He even kind of hinted that it was some of the same stuff that he saw prior to the game against Ole Miss, but Alabama showed whatever happened in that extended practice must have gotten their attention. That was almost not really ever a game against Vandy last night.
Well, this is a team full of competitors, and they have high expectations, and obviously they had to wake-up call against a really good Ole Miss team at home in another one of those midweek games when you're coming off of the road on the weekend. So these type games in SEC play can be trap games, but Alabama did a really good job of making the response and keeping the lead and closing it out against Vanderbilt.
The struggle of the starting five is where I hear the fan base. When things are so good, all you have time to moan about who is the actual starters in the game. And I always try to point out, Richard, it's not really who starts, it's how many minutes you're playing. You can't just put these five guys out because you think they're the five best. You got to have pairings and stuff. But Mo Dioubate, when he is on the floor, and that's who I think fans really want to see start maybe now, this kid, I didn't know he could do it offensively like he's doing it this year. And then yet he seems to have even taken it to a different level in hustle points, in rebounding, and defense. I didn't think he had this game in him.
Well, he's showing you a little bit more of what he has. And, as obviously a guy who's had the reputation of being a glue guy, a hustle man, an energy player, has showed he's had a little bit of skill set. But listen, fans got to understand there are no starters. Like and even in American basketball, you got to stop the starting five. They're teams, and good teams have depth. And you would think they would trust a coaching staff that's won a couple of SEC titles and taken their program to a Final Four, that you put players in the game to match up against the defense to give your team an advantage. Mo Dioubate is a player that is the matchup problem. And when teams don't have the ability to prepare for him as the top guy at the top of the scouting report, he's able to come into the game and change the rhythm of the game in a positive way. As a player, when you're coming off the bench, oftentimes you embrace that role. You get to see what the game is like, the flow of the game, and it tells you how you need to bring your energy and effort to try to make a difference. He's doing an outstanding job within his role, and he's even starting to show a little bit of an expansion of his role for Alabama.
Nate Oates loves to talk about the hard hat. He gives a hard hat award. That's a guy, though, Dioubate, he could have his own every game. I mean, that style is what that hard hat is emblematic of, right? I mean, he is, if you were like, point out the guy that is the hard hat player, it is Mo Dioubate.
Well, he embodies it for sure.
Yeah.
And I love it because for me, he has a little bit of a throwback game. You have a lot of guys now that love to play with the finesse. They want to shoot the outside ball. They want to play in space. But he is a guy who embraces the physicality of the game. He takes the fight to the opponent. He's always around the ball. And you see that type of aggressive play. Oh, good things happen. You get the foul calls on your side. You soften the defense up. And it's demoralizing to teams when you get second and third opportunities on offensive rebounds and steals in passing lanes when they're trying to get in a rhythm and play with finesse. He's the type of player that you have to have on your team if you want to be a championship caliber basketball club.
What are you seeing in Jaren Stevenson? The offensive game isn't what it was at times last year. Do you think it's just a funk, confidence streak? What do you see when you watch him play?
Well, I think you see what everyone else sees, and that's loads of potential. And I do think last night was one of the best games that I've seen him play. I think he had a really good game last year in the NCAA tournament en route to the Sweet 16 against North Carolina. But 10 points, 7 rebounds, some strong post-ups, because when he's playing the three position, he's going to have a mismatch every single game at 6'10". You're going to have a smaller guy on you, and that's not going to have the length. He has the ability to score at the basket. He also has the ability playing the three that you're probably going to be playing a guy who's not as potent as a shooter. So you have the mobility to range around on the back line as a rim protector. So the potential is there. it's puzzling why you don't see him tap into what he can do. But he's still a young player. This is a guy who reclassified, who would have been a true freshman this year. And he's starting to come into his own, and you can see his body is changing. So it takes a while for players to develop. I think fans and people should be patient. He has a long time to continue to be a good basketball player, and hopefully he can have some of those good days while he's wearing crimson.
Okay, I'm going to put my fan hat on here and ask a negative question, but not really. I mean, I just expect a world from a LeBaron Philon. What do you think has happened? And maybe through your reporting, you've learned some stuff that's going on. What has happened with LeBaron Philon offensively that has changed the last 3 games? I know he's pretty good at Kentucky, but last 2 in Coleman Coliseum have not been his big games.
Well, he's a freshman. And as I mentioned, when you are the player that is at the top of the scouting report, the other team has a strong priority to try to stop you. LeBaron Philon's been a 3-time SEC Freshman of the Week. He's shown that he has the ability to play make, not only for himself, but for others. He's dynamic, and he has the ability to stretch it out from the outside shot when he's shooting. Teams are geared up that they know they have to be able to stop him because he can be a player that can be largely impactful on the winning margin for Alabama. And as you get into conference play and things starting to tighten up and possessions are more valued, it becomes more and more difficult for freshmen to have the contribution that they may have had in the non-conference slate where there wasn't as much film on. It's the challenge for him that he has to continue to study the game. You have to watch your opponent. You have to study what you were able to do in the non-conference, how it was effective. And you need to find a way to figure out how to maximize the opportunities that you have with the ball when the defense is tight on. It's a learning curve. Everyone goes through it, and he'll be just fine.
I'm interested on your thoughts on the progression of Aden Holloway as a shooter. I mean, in that first half last night, I don't think you could have drawn up a tutorial of rotation of the basketball, how smooth it looked coming out of his hand.
Man, I mean, he has a beautiful shot. But if you watch it, it all starts with 2 things. His feet, and he is always on balance when he shoots. And he takes shots that he can make. You know, oftentimes you see young players, they shoot tough shots of high degree of difficulty. They love to shoot off the bounce with the step back threes beyond the NBA range. But he does a really good job of using the offense to find the spots where he needs to shoot. And that's by design. You're going to make the shots that you practice. And if you practice shooting those type of shots at full speed, then you're going to be able to knock them down in the game. And he's talked so much about the work that he's put in with his shooting ability, and it's starting to show.
You know, one of the most impressive plays, though, in the game for him, to me, though, Richard, was Vandy had a 3-on-1 run out. And Holloway gets back and makes a clean block. I mean, first of all, it was a heck of a hustle play. But second of all, that was a great defensive play by him.
Oh, I loved it. You know, I was on the call, and I loved that play. That was a play that is a game-changing type play. Because here you have Vanderbilt. They're coming from behind. They need to get a big play. The turnover is made. Holloway immediately gets on his horse, gets back into the paint, recognizes that it's 3-on-1 barreling down on you, and the elevation to jump up top and to block that shot at the pinnacle. I mean, it's impressive for a 6'1" guard to make that play, and it's the mindset, because you'll see a lot of times smaller guards will concede that when they have guys barreling on them, but to make that play was huge. That's the type of stuff that coaches will show in the film room over and over and over again as an example of the type of attitude you have to have on the defensive end.
I felt like the Vandy coach should have chewed some ass at that point.
Well,
3-on-1, and I don't give it up.
Yeah,
but
you can't let a
give it up.
Yeah, you can't let a 6'1" guard stop a 3-on-1. I'm with you. Yeah,
Got to give it up.
I mean, you got to give that up. I want to ask you about the SEC tonight in Oxford. Number 13 Texas A&M, number 16 Ole Miss, 8 o'clock on ESPN2 there. Obviously, that's going to be a hard hat game. That's going to be 2 really good defensive coaches in Buzz and Beard there. But this Ole Miss team, after I saw them in person in Tuscaloosa, that team's scary, man. I know they lost at State, but that's a scary defensive team, isn't it?
For sure. And I don't know. It might have been here. I think someone asked me, you guys asked me who was my dark horse, and I said I think it might be Ole Miss. You got a coach who's been to the national championship game. Ole Miss is returning 3 starters: Jamin Brakefield, Matthew Morrell, Juju Murray, These guys have experience. They're tough. They play physical. You import some guys from the transfer portal, Padula, Dre Davis from Seton Hall, who wins the NIT. You have guys who are seasoned, and Malik Dia, who has SEC experience at Vanderbilt and put on a show in Coleman Coliseum with a big-time double-double. They are built to be disruptive. And that's the type of style of play that, depending on how you play and the style in which that you enjoy playing basketball, if you like playing up and down and free, they're not going to allow you to do it. And they're going to set the tone. They play at a slow pace in which they can control the tempo of the game. And they've been able to be successful with that. I think Alabama fans saw exactly what that's like. And they'll have another game of a team that plays similar and likes to get on the offensive boards tonight with Texas A&M.
My fascinating stretch for Tennessee. I want to talk about this Tennessee-Auburn game with you, but first, just on Tennessee, they beat State by 12 last night, but they're at Auburn Saturday where they'll be underdogs. Auburn may get marooned back. We'll talk about that game specifically in a moment. But Kentucky at home, Florida at home, Missouri at home, all those are ranked teams. All those are good teams. This in a lot of ways, this stretch will define Rick Barnes' team here in the middle of the season.
Absolutely. Well, Rick Barnes' teams are going to give 100%. They're going to be prepared. When I look at the roster, I don't know if they have the dynamic scorer of Dalton Connect, who was able to bail them out last year. Now, Chaz Lanier is terrific. And in his own right, he should not be compared to Dalton Connect because they're two totally different players, even though the point production is there. Lanier lives more so with his shooting ability as opposed to being a three-level scorer who can shoot from the outside, drive, post up, and play in the mid-range. And it's been effective. But Tennessee has to find a way to manufacture some offense when they're playing against high-level defensive teams. It's going to be a good one against Auburn. Auburn is a team that I've spoke highly on. They can play multiple ways. They can play up-tempo. They can slow it down. If they have Broom back in the lineup, you have a post player who can demand a double team. But Tennessee's been number one in the country, and I think they benefited from that from some other teams slipping. But at the same time, this is still a powerful team, and their biggest weapon is the fact that they play with so much synergy. That's a true team. They seem to like each other. They have veteran leadership, and the true point guard, maybe I think the best point guard as far as running the show is concerned, is Zakai Ziegler. But they got a tough one in front of them, but that's just the SEC this season.
Yeah, and Ziegler's an experienced guy going to Neville Arena. That's the type of guy you would want. But Auburn's backcourt has been extremely good. I mean, we talked about Philon, the freshman, earlier. Tahaad Pettiford's had just as good a year as a freshman. I mean, this guy, as a newcomer, has been tremendous for the Tigers.
Well, he jumps right in off the bench, and he changes the entire game. Deep shooting range. He's impactful on the defensive end with his tenacity. He can get into the paint and create for others. But Auburn comes at you at waves. I mean, it's not just Janai Broom and what he's able to do on the interior. You've been able to see what Bruce Pearl has been able to do as far as making adjustments without playing with the weapon that many thinks is the national player of the year. So the shooting ability, Miles Kelly, Chad Baker-Mazara, Denver Jones and what he's able to bring to that team is just remarkable. And they're playing high-level ball. But this will be a test, and I expect the Vols to be ready to go into the jungle.
Yeah, tough to stop that Spain pick and roll that Auburn likes to run.
Well, I played in Spain for 3 years. I know a lot of people talk about that action. I played there for 3 years. There are some ways you can stop it. But just with anything, it's always going to be personnel-driven. If you don't have the Jims and the Joes, then I don't know how much it matters that you have good X's and O's.
Last time Richard was on, I had seen a TikTok of that Spain pick and roll, and I could not remember the name of it during the interview, so I sent it to Richard. He's like, yeah, that's the Spain pick and roll. I played in Spain. He breaks it down. So you know what I do? I cut and paste, and I send it to Stephen Pearl. And Pearl's like, dang, Brown, how did you know about the Spain pick and roll? And I was like, no, Richard Hendrix told me all that. Yeah. that was a cut and paste.
I'll make sure to tell Stephen, no, I won't tell anybody how they might potentially stop it. I'll let those guys on the staff, they can do that on their own. I don't. That's outside of my pay grade to let people know how you guard it. They need to figure it out.
Pearl was blown away, though, for a minute that I knew the Spain pick and roll. I had to tell him that. It's all for Richard Hendrix right there. Richard, thank you very much for the time. Always good talking with you.
Thank you, guys. Enjoyed it.
All right, buddy. Take care. Richard Hendrix with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.